Hello, professional property managers. Andrew Smallwood here, and I'm here with Matt Whitaker, who is the CEO of Evernest and also the host of one of our favorite industry podcasts, 300 to 3000. Matt, it's great to have you with us today. Thanks for taking the time.
I am so excited to be here. I got to tell you, Andrew, I am actually super nervous about this because I think a lot of second nature, and I think a lot of what you guys are doing in the industry, and you have such a powerful voice in the industry, so I know a bunch of people are going to listen to this, so I'm just trying not to screw it up.
Well, I know the feeling is reciprocal, and really appreciate you being here with us today. Thanks for the kind words. And we've got a lot we're excited to cover today. Just to kind of let people know where we're going. We're going to talk about the future of property management as well as what's working today. We're going to talk about culture. We're going to talk about all kinds of things that are really exciting. And I feel like you've got a unique position and unique expertise. There's not many companies, Matt, that have scaled to 5,000, not just from 300 to 3,000, but now to 5,000 doors, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, we're closing in on that. Haven't hit it yet, but we're headed that way.
Fast approaching. And how many markets are you in now? The number changes every time I talk to you. So
yeah, we actually just announced our next market. So we're opening an office in Memphis. So that will actually make 14 markets, but we have 10 essentially offices that manage those 14 markets.
That's so great. And I know the people that we've met that work on your team, Duncan and Grace and Gray Hall, Jacob more recently, and Kath. You have a fantastic team from Birmingham out to those different markets. And there's a real feel and a vibe that you get. Like when you interact with someone at an Evernest, an Evernest market leader, there's a feel and a vibe of the kind of person that you're going to be interacting with and the kind of quality and level of conversation you can have with them. That's really impressive. And I'd love to start there of just how you think about, bringing in talent, what talent you look for, and how that informs the culture that you're trying to build at Evernest.
We used to have a joke. We used to say we don't hire property managers, and we do hire property managers. Anybody's listening to this, but the whole idea was that, look, we can train property management, and what we can't train are the motivation and the goals and the focus that it takes from really good people. So one of the things I found about the property management business, and this was my story as well, is nobody grows up wanting to be in the property management business. So what we had to do was go out and find really capable people and teach them property management. And what we sell to our people is the ability to move up fast within the organization, take on more and more responsibility, and do that. Some people don't have a ton of business experience, so a lot of people are doing it at a very young age. A lot of our markets are being run by people in their 20s, and they're running anywhere from $1 million to $2.5, maybe $3 million businesses. And you just don't get a lot of opportunity to do that in a lot of different organizations. And so what we do is do a really good job of selling the vision of where we're headed, what we're doing, and people are willing to do property management to be a part of that vision.
That's really great. And, through your company's expansion, one of the questions that was asked actually in our Facebook group, Matt, was through that expansion and attracting these great people who it sounds like share some things in common that you're looking for, like a high level of motivation, a strong ability to focus, some of these certain skills and confidences and attitudes that you're looking for, and training them on the specifics of the business. But what have been the core practices or attitudes or principles that you've kept, anchored, that you want to make sure are consistent across location, whereas you're okay in some cases for a personality difference or a stylistic difference or freedom? How do you think about that?
Yeah, so we have 5 core values that we talk about all the time. And as we're a big believer in the EOS model, Gino Wickman's book, Traction. So it's team, integrity, personal discipline, entrepreneurial spirit, and hustle. So just to hit those real quick to tell you how we think about it. So team, What we think is that if you want to go fast, you can go by yourself. But if you want to go far, like Evernest does, you're going to have to go with a team. And so anytime you climb Mount Everest, one of the reasons we love the name Evernest is it looks a little bit like Everest when you glance at it, is the fact that it takes a team to get to the top of Everest. You can't run up the side of Everest solo. So since we want to go far, we're going to make sure that we have people that are very team oriented, willing to help each other out, willing to pick up the slack when if a team member falls behind, willing to jump in and help out. The next one is integrity. This actually gets a little bit into your question. Of course, we want people that tell the truth. I mean, that's kind of a pay to play type personality. But the other thing we want is integrity actually comes from a word meaning whole. And so we want a whole person, and we love for personality differences because we think that creates a much better business. And so we want people to bring the whole person to the office. We also think a little bit about that in terms of what our why, like to get into Simon Sinek's why, is to develop people personally and professionally. So we think that we play a part in making a whole person. We have selfish motives to do that. We want people to develop personally and professionally because it seems like the better they get personally and professionally, the better Evernest gets. So the more we can teach them how to handle more work, or the more we can deal with stress or eating right or physical activity, they have more energy. They're more focused at work. We just think that that's a really important piece, and it's a kind of a win-win for everybody. The next one is personal discipline. You know that property management is very simply just a bunch of checklists, and people that are personally disciplined to the grind that come with personal discipline, whether that's they have morning routines or workout routines or evening routines that they consistently follow, we found that they're more successful in the property management business because they don't need to break something just to have something fun and new to do. They're willing to stick with the consistency of the process. And you think about professional athletes, we get to see them at the times when they're winning and everything's great and they won the Masters or they won the World Series. But what people don't see is the behind the scenes grind that these athletes do on a daily basis. Like, it's not football season when we're recording this, but I know that there's athletes out there that right now are working out, sweating, running sprints, and they're willing to stick to the grind because they know that at some point they're going to get all the glory for winning. And so we kind of think about that when we talk about personal discipline. The next one's entrepreneurial spirit. What we really mean here, it's kind of hard for everybody to be the entrepreneur, right? Like when we first started, it was really fun to find people that had a bunch of entrepreneurial spirit and say, hey, we're going to give you a lot of autonomy to do whatever you want to do. As you grow an organization, it starts to become a little harder to do that. We still have a bunch of freedom, and I think everybody would still say they have a lot of autonomy, but really what we mean is ownership of the role. One of the things I found about entrepreneurs is that they are very in tune with owning the outcome. And we just want people that kind of own the outcome. And we found that if we have people that own that outcome, then we're going to have a very successful business. And people aren't placing blame. We really want to build the machine for success, and having people own the outcome seems to do that. And then the last thing is hustle. Right before you and I jumped on, we talked a lot about baseball, and I'm a former baseball player. And one of the things that I always tell the kids that I coach now is everybody can run out onto the field. Everybody can do their best when a ground ball is hit to them. And we want team members that are hustling. There's two types of errors in baseball. There is the error of on a ground ball, I sat back, I let the ball come to me. By the time the ball got to me, because I didn't hustle, the runner was a little further down first base than I thought, and I have to make a fast throw, and I throw the ball away. That's the error of waiting back, and we want people that make the error of, hey, I did everything I could. I charged the ball, I threw off my back foot, and it just happened to not work out. And so we think about hustle in the context of we want to make a lot of mistakes, but we want to make a lot of mistakes because we're going fast. and not because we're sitting back and hoping that the ball doesn't get hit to us. So when we think about our whole team, we constantly talk about, when we're going through our hiring process, we affectionately call the grinder. We're thinking about this in the context, is this person exhibiting these core values? And then when we have a team member and maybe we're struggling with them, or we do one-to-ones on a monthly basis, we think about these core values and even share with them when we feel like they're not living up to the core value.
That's really great, and really appreciate you kind of putting a little detail on the core values, because for so many people, sometimes a word is just a word, but you start to understand the definition of how the Evernest team, shares a definition and expresses themselves, right, in these core values in such a way where it becomes apparent, it becomes consistent across location, right? If you're working with people, these are the kinds of people who share these kind of values. This is what they're thinking about on a daily basis and how they conduct themselves, how business is done around here, as it relates to those values. But it sounds like you have personality differences, which rings true as I think about your team, because some of them seem like they might have an athletic background. Some of them have worked with the State Department previously. There's all these interesting backgrounds, and there's a real diversity of kind of what worlds they've come from, but they do share a lot of the characteristics that you just mentioned. That seems apparent even just to somebody like me who's interacted with them only a few times. So, Matt, I've got a follow-up question on this, which is a big question on people's mind right now is, and maybe somebody's listening to this in 2026, because there's probably some timeless lessons here. But, for those of us listening in 2021, what the world has gone through in the last year and a half, it's raised some really big questions about in-office culture and just having office space in general. And when you're working across multiple markets like you have, you already had a quote-unquote remote workforce to a certain degree, right? But what are the kinds of things that you've learned or assumptions that have been challenged, or what's your current thinking on this amongst the leadership team at Evernest of, are we getting back in office? What's back in office? What's market specific? What's centralized? What's remote? And how you can keep this great culture sustained and building, in that kind of environment, in those circumstances?
Yeah, this is a great question, because I don't think I'm going to have all the answers, but I can tell you that we're asking a lot of these questions internally. We just got done with our leadership offsite, and we talked about, do we want to bring everybody back? Do we feel like we're missing out on some of that culture piece? And what we decided is we may be too far gone to bring everybody back, because we started hiring top talent remotely. And we're dealing with some of that too, right? Being in a secondary, even maybe a super tertiary market like Birmingham, we feel the effects of California, New York companies coming in and hiring people to work remotely out of Birmingham. And so we think that it's, for us, it's going to be probably something we're going to have to deal with to compete with these companies. We're going to have to offer some of the same things that they're willing to offer, which is working remotely. So what we said is, at the market level, we're going to let the team leader make that decision, because the team leader is responsible for driving culture down within their organization. And so we have one market that I know of that the team leader requires their team to be there 3 out of 5 days. We have other markets where, maybe like in Atlanta, where it's just harder to get to the office. And I don't know what Duncan's going to decide who runs Atlanta, but point being that we think that is very localized as well. Our corporate office, we were actually looking for corporate space when COVID hit and hadn't signed any leases, thank goodness. But our corporate office, we just hired a new remote accounting person that's going to run all of our property accounting in Texas. And we don't even have an office in Texas. So obviously she's going to be working remotely for us. And so we decided, look, this is too far gone. We're going to have to go throughout the country and find the top level talent. And you are exactly right. When we switched to remote, we did not skip a beat, because we were used to working remotely. We have a team of about 40 people down in Mexico, Obviously, we have 9 different offices, I guess, quote unquote offices now spread throughout the country. And we were used to being on Zoom and having these conversations. I think the key question is, everybody's pushback is, well, how do you build culture when you're in a bunch of different places? And I think what you have to do is be intentional about it and be strategic about it. I don't think there's any one formula that works for everybody. Like, building culture in Denver may look different than building culture in Atlanta or building corporate culture. One of the things we are doing is we're bringing everybody, who we consider leadership in our organization. So it's about 20 people to Birmingham in 2 months. And we're going to spend a day and a half together and be super intentional about building relationships across departments, across markets, having team leaders spend a lot of time together, so that, because keep in mind, we've grown a lot during COVID. And so there's a lot of people that never even seen each other in person. And so we just think it's going to be important for us to be intentional about bringing people together at certain cadences throughout the year. There's a great book out there. I think it's called Remote, by the guy that started, help me out here, Jason Fried.
Oh, yeah.
He started
Basecamp.
Basecamp, yes. And he actually wrote a book that their entire company is remote. And he wrote a great book, which is really easy to read. You can read it all on a Sunday afternoon, about how he builds culture while working remotely. And one of his key takeaways, or one of my key takeaways, was they do get together on a consistent basis. And so maybe the money that I would spend on office space could be better spent on getting everybody together somewhere in the country.
That's so interesting. Yeah, it makes me think of some of the things that, we've noticed, and talking to other property managers that have been noticed too, about working in this distributed workforce. You mentioned how talent is now accessible all across the country, and yet also competition for talent is also happening all across the country, which is an interesting dynamic. One of the things that you mentioned was that you're really intentional about relationship building and trust building, even when there's a remote team. So whether that's bringing people for leadership offsites, whether it's how you connect on Zoom and taking time for that, I think that's where a lot of people got tripped up, around March, April of last year, as they were moving into, a Zoom and distributed type of setup. Is you start to see these information gaps that occur, of, hey, this team doesn't know about what's going on versus this team doesn't know about what's going on. And working in a departmental type of structure like that, there can be information gaps that present themselves that you've got to solve for as a business leader. But one of the big things is the relationship building and the trust building. And you mentioned, hey, this money that people are spending on, 10,000 square feet of corporate office space, potentially, or whatever the number is for you, looking at, hey, how do we bring people in for a couple of days and not just use that time to do information sharing about the business, right? But how do we do it in such a way where they're more connected to each other, and there is that trust, there is that bond that lasts beyond that moment as they're working together digitally and remotely in the months to follow. That's really great what you should. And the book recommendation, you said Remote by Jason Fried. We'll make sure to get that in the show notes. That's great.
And what I would say, Andrew, I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, when I get everybody together, it's going to be relationship first, and then fill in the gaps with vision sharing and all the other things we're going to do. I mean, as you know, when you go to a conference and we have these relationships that we've built throughout the NARPM world, it really is more about the time in between the sessions. Not that we don't learn great things in the sessions, but it's really more about the time in between the sessions where you're developing deep relationships with people that you can pick up the phone and call. And I want to build that same type of connection amongst my team. How can I facilitate and foster relationships in my team so that somebody in Nashville can pick up the phone and call somebody in Denver and say, hey, I'm having a problem with this. Whereas the COO or whoever's running the operations or managing the team leader doesn't always become the only voice of truth.
Mm. It's something that's so powerful, I think, to me about your leadership, Matthew, and I know you'll say this is also extended throughout the leaders on your team, which I think is true as well, that I think is an ethic we share at Second Nature is, great companies and great businesses, great leaders, it's not just about, can this person perform the task, in front of them, in the 40, 50 hours of work product that they're supposed to deliver, but they think very intentionally about what's the health of the connection between the team members? What's the strength of the bond, right, between those people? And, for people with an entrepreneurial spirit who are team oriented, who are disciplined, who are focused, who are motivated, etc., when those people can pick up a phone because they want to talk to that person in Colorado and say, I saw you were crushing this and I've got to learn what you're doing so I can get that result. And there's that kind of conversation going on voluntarily in your organization that unlocks a kind of performance, that most people don't see in their business if they don't intentionally do that. It just seems like that's a really special part of the special sauce over at the Evernest organization.
Yeah, and I'd say, like, if you probably polled our team right now, we'd probably get a C+ on that. But, coming out of COVID, it's become more and more apparent as we continue to scale. The other challenge, Andrew, is just you're constantly adding new team members. And so, I can't be the only vision sharer. I can't be the only teacher, the only coach. And so how do you grow fast, but not lose kind of what got you started, lose the culture that got you started? And so, not only growing fast, if we were all growing fast here in Birmingham, it would be way easier to probably, even though it'd be hard, you'd still be very intentional and you'd have everybody here in Birmingham. But what the challenge that we're all having as we scale companies across multiple markets is not only are we growing fast, but we're also having to disseminate information and make sure it's very consistent. I'll give you a perfect example of something we screwed up. I have a 9-week course that we created through a software called Lessonly. And I had a rock for people that love EOS in September 2019 to put this 9-week course together for new people. And it was basically just culture sharing. It was, a daily dose of the Evernest culture. Well, I haven't touched that thing in about a year now. And I went back and started watching some of the videos. And number one, it still had the name GK Houses all over it. And so you just, those are the types of things as you scale. If you want to keep the difference that got you there, you've got to be personally disciplined. Get back to one of our other core values. You got to be disciplined to updating that on a consistent basis. And so, listen, we've made tons of mistakes. One of the other things we say around here a lot is, if you were an alien, you came in and you just saw our company, you would wonder how we were still in business because of some of the dumb things that we've done. And so we say that I cannot believe we're still in business and doing something like this. So, if somebody thinks that growing a business is very clean and what it looks like probably on LinkedIn from the outside, it's not on the inside. And I think some of our people are like surprised at the success internally, knowing all the warts that we have, that we could possibly be where we are today.
That's great. I'm sure people can relate to that and are encouraged by that, to hear that, hey, a company that's grown to this place that has, impressive and what seems like polished people, that you guys have worked through the same challenges, the same problems, the same learnings, that many people listening to this have had or are facing right now. That's really great. I want to go a little different direction. I feel like we've covered a lot on team, talent, culture, how that's working in remote and everything here. A question I have down that I definitely want to ask you is about what you see and what you're looking at when you think about the future of single family property management or small multifamily, the scattered site, however people want to define it. When you look at this industry that we're in and we share together, what images of the future do you see and what are the kind of things you're looking at and paying attention to?
So mine's a little bit different, although very similar to some of the people. We actually just got back from a conference a few weeks ago. And so I was having this conversation with a lot of people, including Thad. He and I talked a little bit about this. I see kind of the property management industry breaking into two worlds. I do believe there is still a place for the boutique manager in the future. Now, there's some people that actually disagree with that, but one of the things I think is hard to replace for a company like ours is that partnership feeling that an investor has when they have a boutique manager that they can call on the cell phone almost anytime. They'll answer. They have a answer for anything because they've seen everything. And I think that that's going to be really hard to replicate for certain investors. We've tried to do our best to replicate some of it, but anytime you're bringing somebody new into the industry that doesn't have 20 years of experience managing properties, they just don't have that type of awareness. And so it's hard to replicate that. And I kind of call that the genius with 1,000 helpers, to use a Jim Collins model. And I think that's going to be there. If somebody wants to grow a property management company, call it 100 to 400 units, and know what's going on with almost every single one of those houses, I think that's great. It's very good. It's going to be a very good lifestyle business. You can make a lot of money doing that. I think what is going to happen is also is on the opposite end of that spectrum. I think there's going to be platform businesses that provide value to investors in other ways. Okay, so the boutique manager is the partner, and the platform business, let's call it, is going to provide basically an ecosystem of everything from property management, perhaps brokerage, perhaps maintenance, all these other verticals that are driving value for their clients, for their customers, maybe their residents. And so, what I would be afraid of is being caught somewhere in the middle, where you got a big enough company that you don't know all your clients, but you don't have a big enough company that you can't drive scale and give your clients and customers the benefit of that scale. So I think it's going to be very much like a dumbbell. There's going to be a lot in the boutique, and there's going to be these really big companies that come out of this, because the industry is undergoing, like the foundation of the industry is being shaken right now. And I think people that are denying the fact that things are going to change is very much like, thinking that something like a Walmart's not going to change the retail industry. But I think everybody can win one way or another by just being intentional about knowing where this is headed, or having a good idea where it's headed, and setting up their business to do well in that future market.
I love what you said there, because we've heard so much conversation in the past months about Zillow, VC companies, like all different kinds of angles of this. And I think people see change happening, but sometimes we see a little too much fear around like how quickly that can happen, and how expansive that change is going to be right away. I think there's some people in that camp of kind of overdoing it. It's like, even if you look at Zillow on the sales side, which is primarily where they've been focused, it's like, yeah, they've got a great chunk of the market there that they're doing now, but it's not like they've taken over 100% of transactions, right? We've got 15 million single family, rental homes, and to be able to scale up to 1 million homes under management, that's going to take companies some time, right, to get there. But to your point, I think the people who are sitting back and saying there is no change, it's the same business as it was 20 years ago, they are going to be left in a tough spot, because things are changing enough where it's an interesting paradigm you present of, hey, are you focused on, you said boutique, and we might say this as, really differentiating on service and experience in a way that's very personalized and it's purposefully not scalable, right? And that's the way that you create value. And there's companies that can do that and pursue that direction. There's other companies that can look at economies of scale and becoming a platform for other businesses and verticals, other ways of monetizing their business in such a way that they can bring value, expanding in a different way to customers in those two tracks. So it seems like Evernest has really picked the latter, if I'm not mistaken, and that's the track that you guys are going down. What attracts you to that, and what do you see for the future down that path as a company?
Well, I think one thing I wish I'd asked myself, and this is probably I think this is like the first or second episode on 300 to 3,000. I wish I had been more intentional. I think one of the things that people get into trouble is they think growth is good and that if I grow, I'm going to make more money. And there are, I can tell you dozens of instances where somebody that manages a couple hundred homes that's intentional about it makes way more money than the person that manages 1,000. And there's all sorts of reasons for that. If you want to read a great book on that, read No Man's Land. I forget, I don't know who the author is, but it talks about, once you move past what I would call boutique management. But do you mind repeating that question? Hopefully you can chop that off.
No, totally. So I think, the question we're asking you, I think, is saying, hey, you've got this future, and I think you see two parties. It seems like Evernest is going down the path of scale. And so, what do you see down that path? What do you think is in store for the future? What are the bets you're making at Evernest? What do you see as your role in that side of things?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking that again. So one of the things that we've seen actually recently is we just started a brokerage business, and I made about 15 phone calls to really good property managers that were basically going very deep in one market, and we're building a brokerage business around that. And so in December of this year, we decided, hey, we already do have a maintenance business. So that was kind of our second vertical on top of property management. And we started that years ago, and it's not perfect, but it does really well. And so we were ready to start another vertical with the goal of providing more value to our clients. So we said, hey, one of the things about property management is it can be commoditized at scale. And what are some things that we can do to help drive value to our clients? And so we thought helping people find rental homes, because we have people ask us all the time, why don't we create a system and a kind of a department that basically just helps people, and all it does is support the property management business. The whole goal is for us to use property management as a beachhead. And so we started that. We set a goal of 400 transactions for 2021. And Gray and I had this conversation. Gray has actually moved over to run it. So people that are familiar with Gray Hall, one of our kind of top talents within the organization, moved over from running Denver to running this brokerage business. We said, hey, if we blow it out of the water, we're going to hit 600 transactions. Well, right now, he believes, and I believe, we're on pace for about 900 transactions this year, which is just insane compared to, and we didn't have hardly any transactions in December. What that shows you is the power, and what it showed me is the power of the vertical, right? If I came in off the street, got my real estate license, there's almost no chance in the world that I'm going to be on pace for 400 or 600 or maybe even 900 transactions. But the power of the property management business as the beachhead is really helping us drive that. And there's some institutional people that are, we're helping buy houses. There's who we call Mike the Investor, which is the professional landlord. I mean, we're helping all sorts of different people. And listen, we're continuing to build that out amongst the markets. Like it's basically in just version 1.0, but it just shows you the power of what people will be able to do at scale. Like, what are other verticals? I just think about the resident benefit package. If you think of it at 300 houses, yeah, it makes a little bit of money, and it probably definitely something you should do with the boutique business. But think about the platform business that manages 25,000, 100,000. I mean, those numbers are just mind-numbing what you can do with that scale. And so those are the types of things these platform businesses are really thinking about making little bits of money in scale.
I love what you said there, which is, and we talk to our customers about this a lot. Like, there's an analogy out there of, are you selling the razor or are you selling the razor blades? You mentioned property management as your beachhead, but hey, once you're there and you've got the investor relationship and you've got the resident relationship, and as you're really starting to figure that out, you see opportunities to say, we can solve more problems for this person, right? And create what we call triple wins, the name of this podcast. And, in-housing maintenance, brokerage, these are, by the way, I didn't even know there was 900 homes available for listing in the market right now, Matt, the way things are going, but that's really exciting. And there's, I think, a ton of opportunity out there to say, if we can really be known as the experts for the home, right? And the person you can trust and the person who can make professional decisions about the home so that it's managed well as an asset and so that it's managed well as a place to live, that's where resident benefit package really fits in, right? And hey, what are the kinds of products and services that create the number one resident experience in SFR? And that's our goal in partnering with people in doing that. So I love that you raised that as a specific example, but there's so many more opportunities that fit that same kind of vision for how you're looking for opportunities in the market. So I think that's a really great, really great share. I want to do this before we wrap up. We've talked about the future. Certainly, if there's anything else that you wanted to say there, feel free to take it down that path. But I wanted to ask you, what's working right now? If somebody wanted something really tactical, really practical that you guys have implemented at Evernest, whether it's in the last 6 months, 12 months, or even since you started, what's something you would give to people to implement that you feel like every property manager, professional property manager, should be doing today?
Yeah, so a perfect example would have been the brokerage. That's really working for us right now. But I'll use something else since I already talked about that. Our leasing is really working right now. And you might say, well, Matthew, everybody's leasing is really working right now. But when I first started the business, the leasing was very manual, right? And one of the things I remember driving from one house to another, which from one side of Birmingham to the other is about 30 minutes, and showing up at the house and nobody was there, right? I mean, it's the no-show prospect. And I was so frustrated by that because I was like, it's so dumb for me to essentially waste probably an hour after it's all said and done, and this person didn't even show up. And so I really got excited about some of the technology out there that would help you essentially see a house without having to be there. And so if the proverbial pendulum swung from very manual to very automated, and we alienated a lot of people by over automating. If you had to talk to us, we probably wouldn't lease the house to you, because the people that weren't talking to us and could move their way through our automation were able to rent the houses. And we really saw our days on market and our median days on market kind of go way up, almost to the point of just very unhealthy. And so one of the things that we're thinking a lot about is, how do you marry the technology, the automation, with certain touch points that are very high touch for a much higher return? And so what we've done over the last, I'd say 2.5, 3 years, ever since we kind of identified this as a problem, is we have staffed up our leasing department. Whereas we used to have one person that was probably in charge of leasing for 1,000 units, not 1,000 available units, but 1,000 units, maybe one person for 50 to 80 units. Now we're thinking about it in terms of one person for 20. So we still do a lot of automation, but we're also doing a great job of communicating with people. And if I think about it, I'm 41 years old. I don't know that I would lease something without at least talking to somebody. And so it didn't even make a lot of sense for me as a potential customer. So why was I pushing that on our residents? The other thing that we found, which is really exciting, is we get a lot of 5-star reviews out of our leasing department. So that's helping, obviously, with our marketing. So there's all sorts of bigger benefits to marrying technology with really good people and customer service. And I think that marriage is one of the things that we're thinking a lot about here at Evernest. Where else can we marry those two? Where have we over automated? Where do we just have people where we can automate more, where we can bring this kind of synergy of the right dose of each one to whatever problems out there?
Yeah, that's so interesting about the self-showing technology and the interaction of that with the personal touch and the human to human contact through the leasing process. Because I remember talking to some companies, they're like, oh my gosh, we went self-showing full all the way. It's been great. Then I talked to the guys at like Vinebrook Homes who are in the Midwest, and they've got an average rent closer to $1,000 a month. And they're like, yeah, no, we tested it. And they saw something more similar to what you saw, which was that actually their days on market was going up. So it seems like, hey, different people in different markets or different tenant profiles, you've got to be really intentional about what is the leasing experience that those people want. And it seems like what your team really figured out is, hey, by testing and experimenting through that, yes, using the technology that's available today, and also pairing it, with a human experience that people want, you're getting the best results by putting those together and better understanding that customer, moving through that process, really creating the right experience for them. And then what I love about what you just said, that I hope everyone listening to this, but we'll probably clip this one out as a social clip for for people to take away, was turning that, once you figured that out, turning that into 5-star reviews and soliciting that, because everyone knows how hard it can be to deliver perfectly as a property manager over a 4-year tenancy in an occupied product, as well as, the maintenance and everything else you're talking, like delivering a really amazing experience for those things. That's stuff we're going to figure out together in the next decade ahead. But the leasing experience, man, once you've got that figured out, turning that into reviews and reputational impact, that seems like a really smart no-brainer move. I really like that you said that. Man, Matt, here's what I want to do to wrap up. What's a question that we didn't ask you today that you wish we asked, or that you wish more people asked you about property management?
The first one that comes to mind is something I mentioned in passing earlier, is about intentionality about where I'm going to end, where you want to end up. I don't think a lot of us spend enough time focused on that. And so, if I was starting a property management company today, or I was trying to figure out where am I going, I would basically I would do two things. Number one, I would decide, do I want to, be a boutique manager, or do I want to grow a company to scale? And I would also understand and talk to people that have done both, and what is going to be required of me to do that. It takes a different personality to grow a company to scale than it does to manage a boutique business. To borrow from E-Myth, it takes a technician to build a property management company boutique. It takes a business owner to grow a company to scale. I was a great technician. I've had to learn the ways of business ownership. And so but knowing what it's going to take to get there in terms of capital, stress on your family to grow a business, especially if you're going to try to bootstrap it kind of like we did, you just need to know like what the road's going to look like before you do that. The second thing I would do, and everybody asks me, what should I read when I get into business, is if you have not read the book Traction, you absolutely need to. It's amazing how many people will start a business. I'll either buy the book for them or tell them to go buy it, and I'll see them 6 months later and they still haven't read the book. What I believe is that, as we started growing our company, I was riding down the road and I had ideas, I had issues, I had all sorts of things going on. And Traction, the EOS model, gives you a great cubbyhole to stick everything in, and a great way because you're going to have to learn how to run a business and do the actual business piece. Why don't you go ahead and leverage somebody that knows how to run a business, run their EOS model, so that you can focus on the things that generate revenue, which is actually providing whatever service you do to clients. And so, I think I have a heart for the people that just get into this business. They hear, Matthew talk and hear that they're almost at 5,000 units and, dream of being that one day. But take it from somebody who's here. You've got to know, what it looks like to get here, and be ready to go, do whatever it takes to get here. And so I heard somebody say, you want what I have, but are you willing to do what I've done? And being very clear on what that takes, I think, is really important.
That's so great. I think very few people do pause and say, what do I want my business to look like in 2024? Why is that? Why do I want it to look that way? How clear am I on the key milestones and things I'm going to need to accomplish and put in place and how that's going to work? I love what you said about distinguishing the role of business owner, and technician was the verbiage that you use. We see this so many times with people saying, man, I'm so busy in the business, and they're on this treadmill of a high paying job in property management, but you can tell their heart is somewhere else. You can tell their heart is they want to be an entrepreneur. They want to be a business owner. And it's not just that their name's on the door, that they really have a business with a team in place and systems in place that run it, but aren't sure how to do it. And I love your recommendations of Traction. I love your podcast, 300 to 3000, which I think either route somebody goes, by the way, based on the episodes I've listened to. Even people who are interested in the boutique, I've heard a lot of things that they would get value out of, especially for the people who are saying, how do we look and grow scale? Obviously, the title is implicit that that's definitely for you. And Matt, thank you so much for spending time with us today to share your wisdom, share your insights, and share your stories of what's working and what you see for the future. And man, just thank you again. That's it. Just deep gratitude to end it out.
Well, I really appreciate you having me. I don't give this compliment lightly. I really think a lot of the culture y'all have built. And when I'm thinking about culture within our industry, I think a lot of the Second Nature team that you and Thad and everybody's building over there. And it's just amazing to me what y'all have done in the industry. And so like I said, I was really nervous about this podcast because I know the voice you have in the industry, and I'm like, man, like, don't screw this up, Matthew. These guys are giving you a chance, so I appreciate the opportunity.
Mission accomplished. Thanks again. And with that, everyone have a great day. That's all for this episode of The Triple Win. Thanks go out to Carol Housel and Jeff Tucker for everything they do to put these episodes together. And we want to remind everyone that you can find more resources, upcoming events, a link to our private Facebook group where the conversation continues in between these episodes with other professional property managers. All of that you can find at rbp.secondnature.com. Again, that's rbp.secondnature.com. And until next time, keep transforming what it means to be in professional property management by finding and applying your next triple win. We want it to be true that every time we see you, we see a better version of you and your business. With that, cheers.